My name is Aubrey. I live in Pine Island, and I was one of the resident organizers against Google's data center here. Now, if you have not yet read the lawsuit, I'm going to try to break it down in video format in small chunks. Let's see if this works. This is new to us. New to me. Bear with me. But for some context, the lawsuit was started in October of 2025, and it's led by the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, and it's against the City of Pine Island and Ryan Companies, who is the developer behind the data center project. Now, we did not learn that it was Google until February of 2026. So later court documents, you will see Google mentioned. But when the lawsuit was filed between Ryan Companies and the city. So what the city did is they did an environmental review called an Alternative Urban Area Review, AUAR. This type of review is allowable in Minnesota for various development projects, and the Environmental Quality Board has different videos on their website that you can look up to explain the process of environmental review in Minnesota and the different kinds. But for this data center, they used a large AUAR, Alternative Urban Area Review, for Project Skyway, aka Google's data center in Pine Island. So the lawsuit challenges that this environmental review is actually insufficient and illegal in three main ways. And I do recommend that you download the PDF of the lawsuit to actually read it. I do have it with me. But here's the attempt to run it down. Three main points. First, the AUAR, the environmental review for Project Skyway, was insufficient in regards to the scoping process that they did. Now, the scoping process for Minnesota's environmental review is there so that you can put all of the pieces of your project onto one initial document, and that helps them suss out, what are the next steps for the environmental review? What exactly is it that you're building so we can know the full scope? So they are saying that the scoping process was not enough because the project descriptions were too vague. They described the project in two forms or two scenarios. One being a technology center / light industrial scenario. The other one being a technology center only. And the technology center would consist primarily of data center facilities, technology services, research and development facilities, and other similar uses. So the lawsuit alleges that this is an overly vague project description, and that violates Minnesota state law. The second premise for why this environmental review is illegal is that the environmental analysis is insufficient. So, per Minnesota state law, AUARs, again the environmental review done, are required to assess the direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts of a project. And this must be on par with that of an environmental impact statement, an EIS, which is Minnesota's highest level of environmental review. Now, when we're talking cumulative impacts, that means your environmental review can't just say, these are the impacts of this specific project. It's that project on top of everything else that's already in the community, and then what are the impacts from that? Not one thing, it's all the things together combined. What's going to happen? So, the lawsuit alleges they didn't do that well enough, and they should have. So, violation of state law. The third allegation is that the mitigation plan is insufficient for the environmental review. So one of the things is that when you are highlighting mitigation in the environmental review, it's usually to address a potential impact. Now, with the lawsuit stating that the cumulative impacts on the water, on the grid, on the nearby residents, and the local community are insufficient, that leads to the mitigation pieces. How would you address those mitigations? And a mitigation strategy involves having to specifically name, like, this is an identified outcome. Here's a chemical that we're going to use, and we know that this chemical could cause cancer, for example. Therefore, a mitigation strategy would be, we're not going to use that chemical. We're going to use something different that is known to not cause cancer. Or we're going to do some other practices that can avoid the use of chemicals all together. And here's what they are, and here's our commitment to follow through. So with the mitigation strategies, the lawsuit actually alleges that the mitigations were insufficient because all they did was kind of give a rundown, a list of some potential mitigation strategies. They didn't actually state that they would follow through with any of them or identify any plans to follow through with them. And a lot of the mitigation strategies mentioned are simply them saying, well, there's a law, there are regulations, and we'll just follow the regulations. Simply stating that there's a law in place and that there are regulations is not the same thing as identifying an impact and a clear plan to address it in detail. So that is the premise of the lawsuit in a nutshell. Welcome to my TED Talk.